Some truths do not arrive quietly. They hit fast and sharp, and leave you standing in a place you thought you belonged until someone tells you that you never did. My name is Delaney Rhodes, and after 3 months planning a surprise, I believed would finally reconnect me with my older sister. I walked into a moment that made the ground feel unfamiliar. I reached the entrance of Belmont Mansion feeling hopeful in a way I had not allowed myself to feel in years. The guard asked for my name. I told him. He checked his list with full confidence before giving me a puzzled look. "Ma'am, your name is not on the family list." For a second I wondered if he misheard. "I am the bride's sister." He let out a quiet laugh, almost sympathetic. If that were true, it would be right here. Before I could question him further, I saw something that cut deeper than his words. My parents were standing near the side walkway looking straight at me before shifting their eyes away, as if pretending they had not seen me at all. A few steps beyond them, my sister lifted her chin, gave a small, satisfied smile, and turned her back with the calmness of someone who had planned everything long before I arrived. In that moment, I realized this was no misunderstanding. Something had been set in motion without my knowledge, something bigger than being left off a list. I had walked into a story that had already chosen its ending, even if I had not yet discovered what that ending was. If you want to see how everything unraveled from this moment and why my presence at that wedding mattered more than any of them expected, follow the channel so you can stay with me through the rest of this story. Growing up in our Nashville home gave me an early understanding of how differently people can be shaped by the expectations placed upon them, even when they come from the same walls and the same parents. The first memories I can clearly recall involve my older sister, Sienna Rhodes, receiving a kind of careful attention that seemed designed to shield her from anything that might unsettle her. My parents insisted they were treating us equally, yet the patterns in our daily life told a different story. When Sienna struggled with even minor tasks, Mom would step in with quick reassurance, while Dad softened the situation so she would not feel pressure. They believed she carried a fragile temperament that needed protection, which led them to adjust every demand around her comfort. Those adjustments slowly shaped how responsibilities were assigned in our household. While Sienna was exempt from chores that required consistency, I was encouraged to handle them without complaint. Mom told me she trusted my ability to figure things out, and Dad often said I seemed mature enough to manage whatever came my way. Their tone was warm, but the message was clear. They expected me to take on the weight that Sienna did not have to carry. I folded laundry, sorted paperwork for school, learned how to solve practical problems, and adjusted my routines whenever something needed to be done. The dynamic settled into something unspoken, yet deeply ingrained. Whenever Sienna faced a disagreement with peers, my parents navigated the fallout for her. If she missed a deadline or fell behind on a commitment, they found reasons to excuse her. Meanwhile, I learned to correct my own mistakes before anyone noticed, knowing that asking for help might be interpreted as weakness. It was not that they cared less about me. They simply believed I could withstand more than she could, and that belief influenced every interaction. As the years passed, the distance between us formed quietly. Sienna viewed herself as someone whose needs would always be managed for her, and she embraced that role with confidence. I adapted in the opposite direction. I taught myself to handle emotional discomfort by examining it privately, rather than expecting someone to cushion the impact. When Sienna wanted something, she expressed it plainly. When I wanted something, I measured the situation carefully before deciding whether it was worth mentioning. These differences created misunderstandings that neither of us addressed, because speaking about them would have required acknowledging the imbalance that held our family together. Despite the tension that grew underneath, I kept a respectful attitude toward Sienna. She was still my sister, and I believed there would come a time when we could meet each other without the weight of our parents' choices influencing us. On rare occasions when she relied on me, I offered support without expecting anything in return. I convinced myself that patience was a way of protecting whatever bond remained between us, even though that bond felt thin at times. There were moments when Mom pulled me aside to thank me for being steady. Dad mentioned more than once that he appreciated how dependable I was. Their gratitude felt genuine, yet it carried an unspoken acknowledgement that I filled the gaps created by their desire to protect Sienna. Over time, I understood that the roles assigned to us were not temporary. They formed the structure of our family identity, and breaking free from that structure seemed nearly impossible. Still, I held on to the hope that Sienna would someday see me without the lens of comparison, and that I would see her without the quiet resentment that sometimes surfaced when responsibilities tipped too far in one direction. By my mid-20s, my life had shifted into a rhythm that felt entirely separate from the home where I grew up. I had moved to Chicago after receiving an offer from a financial firm that valued determination more than charm, and the change allowed me to understand what it meant to depend on my own decisions, without the silent influence of old family dynamics. The long hours and demanding projects suited the part of me that had learned to stay steady, and although the city felt intense at first, I adapted to its pace faster than I expected. Sienna remained in Nashville and focused on event planning, a path she once described as perfect for someone who could read emotions quickly and create the mood everyone wanted. Her enthusiasm for that world never faded, and she seemed to enjoy the attention it brought. Our conversations became noticeably shorter because her schedule revolved around clients, venues, and deadlines, and she usually filled most of the call with details about new successes. She liked to highlight the moments when people praised her taste or relied on her to fix a crisis, and she repeated those stories whenever she felt they captured her growth. I rarely shared much about my work, partly because the culture of my firm required confidentiality, but also because personal habits developed from childhood made me cautious about appearing as though I wanted validation. Keeping things to myself felt more natural, so our calls turned into updates that leaned heavily toward Sienna's achievements. Mom occasionally asked why I did not share more, yet she accepted my answer whenever I explained that my work demanded discretion. Dad showed curiosity during his calls, but he focused mostly on whether I was eating well or sleeping enough, rather than on the details of my projects. As months passed, the difference in our lifestyles became more obvious. Sienna thrived in environments where conversations relied on gestures, compliments, and the ability to charm people within minutes, while my work required research strategy and the patience to navigate complex negotiations. Each time we visited home during holidays, interactions felt polite, yet distant, as though we were guests who happened to share a history, but now lived within separate worlds. Sienna enjoyed telling relatives how fast her business was growing, and people responded warmly because they admired her confidence. I stayed in the background answering questions only when someone asked about Chicago. The distance between us did not come from anger. It formed slowly through routines that no longer aligned and ambitions that reflected completely different values. Sienna viewed success as recognition, and she liked proving that she could command a room. I found purpose in completing difficult tasks quietly and letting results speak for themselves. Whenever she suggested that I should visit Nashville more often, I reminded her that my workload made travel unpredictable. She accepted the explanation, but made comments about how I had become too serious, which I interpreted as another sign that she did not understand my priorities. My friends in Chicago noticed that I rarely mentioned Sienna unless they asked. They understood that family relationships can remain loving yet complicated, especially when siblings grow in directions that do not intersect. Their support helped me maintain balance during challenging weeks, and their perspectives eased the pressure of comparing my path to hers. With time, I accepted that our connection had become functional, rather than emotional, and although that realization carried a trace of disappointment, it also gave me clarity. 6 months before the wedding, my routine shifted when Sienna called with a tone that carried a rare kind of excitement. She told me she was getting married and described the proposal as if every detail belonged to a perfect moment she had waited years to receive. Hearing the happiness in her voice made it easy for me to share her joy, and I congratulated her without hesitation. She explained her plans with confidence, and I sensed that she expected the entire family to fully embrace this milestone. I assured her that I would be there because supporting her felt like the most natural response. After the call ended, I booked my flight to Nashville and started arranging my schedule to avoid any conflict with work. I planned to arrive early enough to help with preparations if she needed anything. Although our relationship had grown distant over the years, I felt a quiet hope that this event might soften some of the space between us. Weddings often brought people together, and I imagined a moment where we could stand side by side without the weight of childhood roles shaping every interaction. A few weeks later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Sienna's company had entered a difficult phase. The event industry in Nashville had become unpredictable, and several projects she relied on had fallen through. I chose not to ask her directly because I knew how deeply she valued independence. Sienna avoided revealing any vulnerability, especially to me, and I understood that unsolicited concern would be taken as pity rather than support. Instead, I reached out to a colleague in Chicago who managed a private investment fund. I explained the situation and asked whether the fund could provide a discreet capital infusion without attaching my name to it. The arrangement moved forward quietly. The fund conducted its assessment and approved an amount sufficient to stabilize Sienna's operations. I watched from a distance as her company began to recover. New contracts appeared, and her confidence returned to the tone I recognized from earlier years. My involvement remained hidden because I knew she would reject the help if she learned the truth too soon. The purpose was never recognition. It was a way to prevent her from losing the business she had worked so hard to build. As the wedding approached, I considered offering additional support as a gift that carried meaning beyond material value. I planned to reveal my part in the investment during a quiet moment, hoping it would not embarrass her. The intention was to show that I believed in her work and wanted our relationship to grow past the silent distance that had shaped our adulthood. I imagined the relief she would feel when she learned she was not alone in the struggle she had tried to hide. It felt like the right time to bridge the divide, and I allowed myself to believe that the gesture could open a new chapter for both of us. On the morning of the wedding, I left my hotel with the gift box I had spent weeks preparing. The drive to Belmont Mansion felt calm enough because I kept reminding myself that this day might finally close the distance between me and Sienna. All the way there, I repeated a single thought in my mind: I'm here to support her no matter what happened before. That thought held me together until I reached the gate. When I approached the entrance, a security guard stepped forward to check guests. He glanced at the gift box, then at me, and asked for my name. I said it with confidence. He scanned the list, paused for a moment, then delivered a line that sliced through the air. "Ma'am, your name is not on the family list." I froze, waiting for him to correct the mistake. I leaned in slightly and articulated each word clearly: I'm the bride's sister. Before I could ask anything else, a man walked up with the demeanor of someone overseeing the entire event. He introduced himself as Caleb Turner, the wedding planner. In a calm but firm tone, he said, "The family requested that only pre-approved guests be allowed inside." Hearing him mention the family with such professional certainty tightened the confusion swirling in my chest. Caleb checked the list again and added, "Your name is not on the approved list, and I cannot let you in without direct confirmation." I wanted to ask who had made that request, but the look on his face made it clear he wasn't going to change the decision. While I was still trying to make sense of it, movement along the walkway caught my attention. Mom and Dad were heading inside. They saw me instantly. Mom whispered something I couldn't catch, before turning her head away, as if my presence disrupted the harmony of the moment. Dad lifted a shoulder and kept walking without slowing down. No greeting, no question, not even a nod. Their silence felt deliberate, a silent message that said far louder than words. Pretend she isn't here. A little farther ahead, I spotted Sienna standing with her bridesmaids. Her posture was steady and collected the same posture she used whenever she wanted to project absolute control. When her eyes met mine, she gave a faint, unreadable smile before returning to her conversation. She didn't wave. She didn't walk over. She didn't ask Caleb what was going on. Instead, one of the bridesmaids whispered something into her ear, and Sienna let out a quiet laugh. A kind of laugh that silently implied she doesn't belong here. I tightened my grip on the gift box, the very gift I had chosen as a symbol of reconciliation. I had imagined handing it to her and saying, "I really want today to be a good day for both of us." But the longer I stood there, the clearer everything became. No one intended to fix the list. No one came to explain. Anyone who recognized me avoided eye contact as if ignoring me was a rehearsed part of the event. The silence around me grew heavier than the box in my hands. And with every second I remained at the gate, one truth echoed louder and louder in my mind. Someone had decided this long before I ever showed up. That evening, the weight of what had happened settled with a clarity I could not ignore. I sat at the small desk in my hotel room and opened the investment portal I had created months earlier. My decision did not require hesitation because I had offered help in good faith, and the way I had been dismissed at the gate had erased every reason to continue. I authorized the withdrawal of the entire investment package, reviewed each confirmation line, and submitted the request. The transfer completed without delay, and within minutes the account displayed a zero balance for the fund that had carried Sienna's company through its crisis. I closed my laptop and let the quiet of the room mark the end of whatever I had been trying to rebuild. The following week, news reached me through industry updates that her company was struggling with immediate cash flow instability. Contracts were delayed, vendors demanded revised guarantees, and projections revealed a sharp downturn that surprised everyone except me, because I understood how dependent the business had been on that specific fund. I felt no satisfaction from the reports, only the steady recognition that I had warned myself many times about the consequences of trying to fix relationships that required mutual honesty, not silent financial intervention. 2 days later, I released a public statement through my investment firm, confirming that I had been the anonymous investor. The announcement was short, factual, and respectful, without any accusation or emotional commentary. My intention was transparency, not retaliation, because I wanted no one to believe I had acted with secrecy or manipulation. The response online grew rapidly because people had followed the company's recovery and now realized how much support had come from an unexpected source. The next morning, I woke to dozens of messages urging me to check Facebook. Sienna had posted a long status that ended with one line in bold, and it carried the sharpness of a blade she intended to twist. She wrote, "Delaney just wants to humiliate me." Reading it felt like watching a door close with deliberate force. She had not contacted me privately and had not asked for clarification. She had chosen to shape the narrative in a way that cast her as the victim of an imagined attack, even though she knew the truth better than anyone. Within an hour, my phone rang. Mom's voice filled the line before I could speak. She said, "You embarrassed all of us. Fix it." Her tone was clipped, urgent, and entirely aligned with Sienna's version of events. She did not ask what had actually happened at the wedding. She did not ask why I had withdrawn my investment. She only demanded compliance. The call ended as abruptly as it began. Shortly after, Dad called with a voice that carried authority, rather than concern. He said, "You created this problem. You should apologize." He framed the situation as if my refusal to stay silent made me responsible for every ripple that followed. His words revealed a belief that peace required my submission rather than fairness. I listened to both of them without offering excuses because my silence was the only boundary I could control. When their calls ended, I understood that the line I had drawn was final. I would not apologize for telling the truth, and I would not carry responsibility for choices that were never mine. Within weeks, the ripple effects of my decision unfolded with a clarity that surprised even me. The event company that Sienna had built around carefully crafted images began to falter when a long-standing corporate client withdrew its annual contract without warning. The loss triggered a chain reaction because other clients interpreted the departure as a sign of deeper instability. I received calls from acquaintances in Nashville who worked in related fields, and they mentioned how the whispers around town grew louder each day. Their comments revealed fractures that had existed long before my investment was removed. I learned that stress had begun to consume Sienna. She tried to maintain her public persona, although those close to her noticed how her confidence wavered whenever financial questions surfaced. Her husband, who had trusted her version of events, sensed there was more behind the tension she attempted to hide. One evening, he confronted her after discovering inconsistencies in the company's financial history. I heard from a mutual friend that he had said with a steady voice that left no room for deflection, "I need the truth, all of it, without excuses." That request alone exposed what she had concealed throughout their engagement. The discovery marked the beginning of the end for their marriage. He filed for divorce soon after, citing irreconcilable differences that stemmed from a lack of transparency. He chose not to involve me, and I respected the distance because his decisions were based on his own experience rather than anything I had shared. Sienna attempted to reassure him, yet her efforts could not restore trust. Her professional life was unraveling at the same pace as her personal one, and the people who had once admired her efficiency started to question her judgment. Mom and Dad observed the fallout from a place of discomfort. I could sense how their long-standing pattern of protective behavior had lost its certainty. Mom called me with a tone that carried both worry and reprimand, and she asked why I had allowed things to escalate to such extremes. Dad followed with his own request, suggesting that I reach out to comfort my sister. His exact words were, "This family has endured enough distance. You can at least speak to her." Their pleas showed how deeply they wanted to return to familiar roles, although those roles no longer fit the reality that surrounded us. Sienna eventually tried to contact me directly. The first attempt came through a voicemail in which her voice trembled as she said, "Delaney, please talk to me. I need you right now." Later that week, she texted in shorter bursts, hoping repetition would wear down my resolve. I listened to the voicemail once and read the messages without responding because I had reached the limit of what I could carry. For years, I had tried to create a space where we could stand as equals, yet she had chosen to exclude me during the moment when it mattered most. I kept my distance without anger or triumph. The silence I maintained was not punishment. It was clarity. The choices she made at her wedding revealed a line I could no longer cross for anyone, including family. The consequences she faced belonged to the decisions that had shaped her life long before I stepped away. A few months later, I woke with a sense of steadiness that felt almost unfamiliar after everything that had unfolded. I had poured my focus into the work I had postponed for years, and I finally allowed myself to enjoy the rhythm of a life that did not revolve around proving my worth to anyone. My days became clearer once I rebuilt my boundaries and kept them firm, since I no longer wanted to live in a space where my effort was treated as something optional or convenient. The distance from my parents and from Sienna gave me room to breathe, and in that space I began to understand how much energy I had spent trying to be accepted in a place that never intended to welcome me. During that period, my best friend Nina Patel stepped into my life with a presence that felt grounding. I introduced her for the first time to the parts of my story I had never shared, and she listened without interruption. When I told her I felt strange for not missing the chaos, she smiled in a quiet way that held no judgment. She said a simple sentence that stayed with me for weeks. "You are finally choosing yourself." I had heard versions of that idea before, yet the way Nina said it made the truth settle deeper. Someone outside my tangled family tree saw the change, and for the first time I believed I deserved the peace that was growing around me. The months ahead continued with a steadiness I learned to appreciate. I established routines that kept me anchored, and I pursued projects I had delayed while trying to hold the Rhodes family together. I no longer felt the pressure to monitor their expectations or adjust my decisions to soften their reactions. My parents reached out occasionally with short messages that skirted around the events at Belmont Mansion, although I chose gentle distance because the wounds were not ready to be reopened. Sienna tried multiple times to initiate conversations, yet each attempt carried the same urgency she once used to maintain control. I did not respond, since my silence was the final line of protection I had for myself. With time, the quiet became comforting rather than lonely. I learned how to accept moments of ease without waiting for the next disruption, and I allowed myself to build a life shaped by intention instead of obligation. The stability did not erase the memories, but it helped them lose their power. I no longer flinched when thinking about the wedding or the fallout surrounding her business, since those chapters no longer defined me. I closed each day with the quiet understanding that healing was not loud, dramatic, or sudden. It was a slow return to myself. When I stepped back from the people who treated my loyalty as a guarantee, I learned that boundaries are not acts of punishment, but acts of self-respect. We often convince ourselves that family conflict should be endured rather than corrected. Yet growth becomes possible only when we refuse to shrink for the comfort of others. Choosing peace is not selfishness. It is a commitment to the version of yourself that you want to protect. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Your time and your presence mean more than you realize, especially with a journey as personal as this one. If any part of my experience resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Share a comment, tell me what you felt, or simply say hello. Your voice matters here, and I appreciate you for being part of this space.